even talking to one of our guys who's doing our accelerator program right now, he got his first deal from the leads that we've been generating for him in the accelerator program. And he said that he walked it and he's like, ma'am, you have a beautiful house. Like, why don't you just list it? You could definitely get more. And she goes, I know, but I just don't even want to do that. I just want this to be done and over with. And that is a very common conversation. Whereas I feel like when we started this business back in 2020, 2021, we would kind of like hear about that, but we never saw it.
Yeah, we never experienced that.
What's going on, guys? Welcome to today's episode of the Collecting Keys Real Estate Investing Podcast. If this is your first time here, I am Mike DeHaan, and I'm here with my co-host, Dan Austin. And this is the real estate show where we teach you to make massive income, not just passive income, through real estate investing. And I'll be honest, if we're looking at how interest rates are and just how real estate is in general, I'm starting to think that passive income is complete bullshit if you're a rental property
It has completely disappeared for most people right now. If you're trying to be a real estate investor and actually hold things, it's tough. Not that you can't, because you can, and we're working on one right now, but it's challenging.
It's just not the same as it was in the past, right? And I saw this post by Brandon Turner from ex Bigger Pockets host on Instagram, and it was like the ways to actually make cash flow from rental properties in 2024. And
he must be copying my Instagram.
He was actually. He actually quoted you on it.
Damn it.
And but it said short-term rentals, senior living, assisted living, mobile home parks, and something, one of the other ones on there. But the things that I thought were interesting about it were, one, all the things that he described aren't necessarily like the traditional real estate investment. Right? Those are different businesses that you have to start that have whole other systems involved outside of just like the hard asset, besides like a rental property, which you can kind of plug and play. And number two, he was quite brilliant because at the very end he goes, and if you want to know how you can just invest with me and make passive income through mobile home parks, then DM me. He's trying to raise money for his fund. And I'm like,
exactly.
That's a good hook. That guy has a good social media team right there.
Well, yes, he does, right? The interesting thing about that is that's actually shit to pay attention to too, because all last year and the year before, he was raising capital for like A-class, badass, huge rental or apartment buildings, right? Like big old nice things. And now he's talking about storage, which is interesting to me, and mobile home parks, which makes sense because they already have expertise in that. So if I'm sitting back there at like Open Door, I think that's what it's called, Open Door Capital, right? Yeah. If I'm going to say, what's our core business? We got to get back into it. We're losing money. Our core business, we started out in mobile home park investing. We have that as a core pillar. We've been buying mobile home parks this whole time. Let's focus on that and wait out the multifamily issue. So anyhow, that's just an interesting thing that's beyond him just raising money, I think, and just beyond a social media post if you actually read between the lines. Yeah.
And I mean, also too, it's just like when you look at things like that, I think it's okay to come to the realization that if your goal is to get passive cash flow, which it is for everybody, now is honestly just not the time to be doing that. And it sucks. You're going to have to stick with your W-2 a little bit longer if your only sort of methodology with how you want to pursue that is by buying properties and getting a mortgage and putting in a property manager, making it passive. That was always going to take long originally. Now it's going to take extra long. And really, if you want financial freedom now versus waiting out for the interest rates and everything to change, you are going to have to make a lot of money, which honestly I would argue is easier anyway. That's why we have our whole thing with this show that do massive income before passive income, because from our experience, it is like legitimately easier to make millions of dollars than it is to replace like a decent paying W-2 with passive cash flow from assets.
Like real passive cash flow.
And that's coming from back when we were doing stuff at 2.5%, 3% interest rates. Now at 9%, it's even freaking harder.
It's super challenging, right? And like, I think that there is like this arc that I've kind of observed, right? Because you and I are in masterminds with other folks too that have done very, very well in real estate, and that's their tool and mechanism for how they built a lot of wealth. And a lot of them started like pre-2008 or like in the 2000 teens, like early teens, and they spent 10 years just cutting their teeth and building, and now they're sitting back worth 5, 10, 15 million easy, if not more. And they're like, yeah, this is exactly how you can make wealth. But right now, like that tool's not happening. And those are the same people that are sitting back and not necessarily buying, or they're buying from a different position. And I always get worried and like making sure that I convey this proper to people when we're like coaching them. And then because people like to say, well, what would you do? Well, if I'm ahead of you 1, 2, or 3 steps, it's probably not the same as what you're doing, or you're just starting out, or you're at phase 1 or 2 of your investing career, because I have a different financial setup and I have a different risk profile than you do. So for us, like you and I talk, like we'll take risk, like monthly risk, as far as like a negative or slightly break even, like cash flowing property, to buy $100,000 in equity that we can absorb into our portfolio. And we know in 3 or 4 years that $100,000 is going to be $125,000, and we're going to be able to cash that money out. Where a new investor, I would not recommend doing that. So that deal would not be something I would advise you to buy. But for me, yeah, it works.
Yeah, absolutely right. And like that comes with the investment side. And then when it comes on the money making side, I mean, we know people that are in like that $5, $10, $15 million range who have a ton of wealth potential, right? Their cash flow varies like every other investor, but they don't have any money. So they're rich on paper, but they can't do anything, right? Because they never built the skill set. They were able to buy a bunch of, cabins in the Smokies or whatever, but they never developed that vertical income arm. And so now we're talking about like these sort of risks and things that we'd like to make. They don't even have the opportunity to do that anymore.
Yeah, they don't even have the skill set to create that opportunity. Yeah, that's where like we talk about and we focus, you and I, is like a lot of our personal development is on business systems, business processes, how to scale a business, because we took real estate and we've treated it as a business and scaled it. And we're not perfect by any means, but we're doing it the best to our abilities. And now like the confidence to take that and plop it over to a roofing company, or plop it over to, I don't know, pick a company, we can certainly do that. And that's the skill, and that's the capital asset you have.
Yeah. And I also think that that's the reason so many people, they kind of get into the real estate space, wholesaling, flipping, whatever it is, and start to take it seriously and start to do well. They start to shift towards other parts of business that are like real estate adjacent, but not necessarily real estate. Like we know a lot of flippers right now who have gone and started like general construction companies or roofing companies, or, people that were like wholesalers or marketing based companies like ours, just like we started like our mastermind, we started the marketing arm of our business, right? We have like our accelerator program that we're building out. It's because that is like such an easy way to take the skill set that you've developed and scale revenue in a way that is not directly related to what the housing market is doing in your investment zone. And so many people, there's kind of like the age old thing of like someone who starts like a mastermind, they're doing it because they're not good enough to do it themselves, which is, sometimes true, no doubt.
Those who can't do, or those who can do, those who can't teach. I've been guilty of saying that.
Totally, right? And I mean, I thought that until I started meeting people who had legitimate operations and coaching programs. You do it because honestly, the time commitment is relatively low, right? It's very easy to apply the same skills that you've learned to build another business that can do very well. And it's super gratifying to get people to the same level that you're at, right? Or like seeing people kind of go through the same steps. It's kind of like the same way that people get a lot of satisfaction watching their kids. You see them like go through experiences that you remember sort of like struggling through, and seeing them grow, except it's with like a 35-year-old man that wants to spend more time with his kids. Right.
Exactly. Right. This is a really good topic because I just finished listening to Arnold Schwarzenegger's book, Be Useful. And he has a line in like towards the end, which kind of ties together to the title. And it speaks to why people do this. And he has this, I'm going to paraphrase this quote because I got to shorten it down, but it's like, you can call me anything except for a self-made man. And he kind of goes into this monologue about like how each step of the way he had to do the reps in the gym. He had to do the practicing of his acting and his accent and all that. So nobody did the work for him, but he certainly didn't do it on his own. And then he kind of goes into that because of that, like you have the obligation to send the ladder back down and to lift the next group up and to be useful. I just thought that was super powerful, and it speaks to like why you would do that, right? People are like, oh, you must be doing it for selfish reasons. And yes, there's a ton of people that do it for like financially selfish reasons, but selfishly it's to give back, and you have that obligation and you feel that way when you're only one step ahead of somebody. Even like it's a perfect time to give back and recognize that that's how you become bigger and better, is by helping other people.
Yeah, I love that. And I've heard different iterations of that too. I think maybe I want to say it's maybe David Osborne from GoBundance, where his thing is like you're selfish to not share all you've learned with those that are behind you, which I mean is totally valid, because that's like kind of their whole reason. One of their main reasons they started GoBundance was they wanted to be able to share what they've learned about business and leading an epic life with the other people.
Think about that. So that is so valuable. Think about, like, David Osborne is worth over 200 million now. Obviously a wealthy dude. He does not necessarily need to provide time or value to the folks of GoBundance, but he does. And we pay quite a bit of money. Like, if you do the math on like GoBundance as an organization, like, it makes a fair amount of money, not anything crazy, but a fair amount. There's costs associated with that running it, but that is not hitting his bottom line. He does not give a crap about that. He makes less money contributing time to GoBundance than he would his own business. So it's fascinating that a person like that would say the same thing in his position and still be prepared to give back and teach people.
Yeah, and there's a lot of different iterations of that. But anyways,
off that topic, let's talk about what's going on in our business and the market and stuff, man.
I mean, the market's been so interesting right now, man. So we had a crazy week to end last week. We ended up getting 9 signed around last week, and like 7 of them were between like 5:30 p.m. on Thursday and like 1 p.m. on Friday. It was
I couldn't keep up. I was like, is my like Slack, is it like glitching out? Like, I thought I already said congrats on that one.
Yeah,
there's another one
just going off. It was crazy. And like, that's one thing with that is that's kind of how this business works. Regardless of how big you try to go, this business is always one of ebbs and flows. It's just the difference is as you have scale, instead of the ebbs and flows being like, oh, you got 0 to you got like 2 in a week, it goes from you got 2 in a week to you got 10 in a week, right? And, somewhere in between. And it makes, cash flow is always a challenge with this business because of that. But there's something with like, I don't know, being a people-facing business, say it's the moon cycles, the universe, like people are all kind of on the same calendar, the same sort of like mental clock. People tend to make decisions at the same time, whether that's sellers, whether that's buyers, whatever that looks like. And so, we always get into these phases where all of a sudden we're super crazy busy. But one of the things that's so interesting, though, is we've had this major increase in properties that I would say are like near turnkey, or they're like very high quality properties where the seller knows they could sell them for more. They know it probably needs like a tiny bit of work, or it's like not as desirable as the other houses in the neighborhood, but it's still fine. And they are willing to take a pretty massively reduced offer just to be done with the property. And sometimes these properties have even been listed for like 6 months and had no bites, and we'll get them for 25% less than they were listed for. And that's become such a reoccurring pattern, right? And like even talking to one of our guys who's doing our accelerator program right now, he got his first deal from the leads that we've been generating for him in the accelerator program. And he said that he walked in and he's like, ma'am, you have a beautiful house. Like, why don't you just list it? You could definitely get more. And she goes, I know, but like, I just don't even want to do that. I just want this to be done and over with. And that is a very common conversation. Whereas I feel like when we started this business back in 2020, 2021, we would kind of like hear about that, but we never saw it.
Yeah, we never experienced that.
Right? Yeah, like at all. We were always just dealing with crackheads. And that's why if you go back 2 years in the show, all we do is talk about crackheads because that's what we were dealing with all the time.
Yeah, we haven't had to talk about crackheads in a little bit.
Like, honestly, for quite a while. And I think it's because most of them, they are in a place where they've lost their homes at this point, or if they did so, they don't have anywhere to go. So now we are truly turning into what I would call like a services-based business, where instead of it being a situation where it's like someone is completely screwed and like they don't have a choice, they are 100% opting to walk away from significant equity in order to use our service of, giving them a guaranteed sale in their house.
Well, and if you think about it, like, and it's all context, but if you think about like a situation, so say somebody gets to the point to where they need to sell their home or they want to sell their home, and that they've made that choice now in 2023, and they've watched their neighbor and their friends and their family go through this battle of selling their house on the market, and people walking through and people telling them their house sucks and price dropping in, it taking 6 months for them because their realtor overpriced it. And there's all this stuff that really can affect the emotional standpoint of a person trying to sell their home. Like, there's nothing worse than somebody walking through your house like 50 different people actually and telling you your house sucks and they're not going to make an offer even after you drop the price, all this stuff. And so if you're a person, like I said, who has to sell it or has the need to sell for whatever family reason, or you just want to move, you're like, I don't want to deal with that crap. I don't want people walking through my house telling me it sucks. I kind of know it sucks a little bit. Like I know I'm honest about my situation. And they're like, I don't want to go through what my sister went through. I don't want to go through what, my friend Sally did. Like, let's just sell it and let's move on and make it quick. And I can get from point A to point B much quicker with this service.
Yeah, totally right. And, if you can get decent properties, like even if you have to lock in more expensive debt, I mean, and they're in A-class areas in parts of the country where people actually want to live, you might as well buy it.
Right.
Because that's also why it's so important to be buying properties at a discount. Because if you're buying an A-class property in a nice part of the country for 70 cents in the dollar, and you have to get some expensive debt, whatever, but then the market takes a 25% dump, you're still at least on top.
You're still okay. That's a good point, because we started off the show talking about how hard it is to buy and it is hard to buy for cash flow, but it's not necessarily difficult to buy for equity if you can negotiate the right prices, and if you can sustain a 2-year period like dealing with kind of like this property that's just this thing and it's not like making you a ton of money. I think that's where the people are going to shine, and those are going to be the winners when we look back on this couple year period and be like, damn it, just like we talk about people that were buying houses by the droves in 2010, like they're doing all right now. But back then it was not quite apparent what the exit was going to be.
Yeah.
It was different. It was hard.
Totally. And I think that's something that's so underspoken is, people are talking about the uncertainty in the market right now. They shouldn't be buying. We've had, I don't know, probably about a dozen investors on this show at this point who were buying even before and during the downturn, to continue buying through 06, 07, 08. And they all say the exact same things. Like, yeah, we had no idea what was going to happen. We just knew that if we bought stuff at prices that made sense for us or at discounted rates, then we would be fine. I mean, even Aaron Steggy, when he came on, he was flipping during the downturn. Yeah. So he had his exit prices, and they also just had the timeline about what they expected the market to be dropping every month, and they were basically just trying to race it and get out before the low price got to wherever they were at.
Totally.
And that's why that dude's worth like $50 million now and owns hundreds and hundreds of properties, because he was willing to put his nuts on the line when stuff was really weird.
Yeah, and if you think about it, like if you actually, whatever you want to do in life that is in your head that seems like challenging, if you actually put it on paper and write down the steps you'd have to take to do that, like how do you flip during a market? And like you don't know what's going to happen next week or next month, but like how do you do it? You're like, well, I know that hot properties in my market are sitting on the MLS for 62 days. They have an average price drop of this percentage. If I'm going to buy a house now, I need to price it to sell it super fast, which means if I assume it goes down 2 or 3% a month for 3 months while I'm flipping this house, my actual ARV is less than that. So negotiate those prices on the properties you can, and then you can continue to flip during a downturn. It's like this, instead of this, like everybody wants to flip during an uphill market because you buy it and it's worth more when you sell it. Like that's awesome, right? But on the downhill, you got to buy it and it's worth less than you thought it would be. So you just have to price that into your numbers.
Yeah. And I think the number one thing too is just because it's business and it's macroeconomics, you can never be 100% certain. So you got to
absolutely not. You have to. That's why it's investing. That's why there's big winners, there's big losers, right? You don't ever hear a guy that goes to casino and only spends $20 and loses it. And it's like, oh damn it! It's like, yeah, the dude that won $10,000 though, he was putting some money on the line.
Yeah, right, exactly. But
not that I advocate for gambling. It is fun though.
You and me, if we live somewhere where gambling was accessible, we'd probably get in trouble.
Like in Vegas, where like you go to the gas station, like I'll throw $5 in.
Dude,
why not? Yeah.
It's dangerous, man.
It is.
I like to go to a good time. We should. We need to find a way to do like a good like Christmas party for our team again, like we did. We only ever did that one years ago. Remember we brought James and Judd to the casino and we gave them their $5,000 bonuses in cash.
Bought them a steak dinner, and then
and then they proceeded to each spend like $25 playing blackjack, and that was it because they were too afraid.
Until like you remember when I go to James into like making the bet because he's like, bro, like he was like down or something like that, and I was like, put it all out there, dude. I was like, he's like, no, dude, I can't. And in hindsight, that's like a total dick move on my part. But I ended up, I was like, I will pay you. I will pay you whatever you lose if you lose again. And he actually won. And I can't remember how much he won. It was like a couple hundy.
It was a couple $100. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just like hazing your
Totally.
freaking employees.
In hindsight, it was kind of
that was years ago. That was back when we were like super small business. You're just making dumb stuff.
Yeah, you have fun. You buy people steak dinner, give them some cash, and let them get debaucherous.
Yeah, but that's funny. But so business has been interesting though, to sort of like see that pan out, and then finally it seems like the phone issues are behind us with all the 10 DLC requirements. So if you guys do any sort of online calling or use texting services, you've probably seen a wide range of issues with those services over the past couple of months. If you haven't seen issues, or like, I haven't heard about that, then you should probably go check with your service provider, because I guarantee that they're having issues and they're just not telling you about them. Yeah. But it was massively affecting our response rates within our CRM. It was massively affecting our SMS marketing that we run. But it all appears to be turning up. And I also think that's the reason that we got a bunch of deals signed around last week, because I personally think that the CRM that we use, they did not fully disclose when they were having all these issues months ago, because we started to see this huge decrease in responses, and we were like, is it because of the summer? Like, people are out doing stuff, whatever. But then it became like an official issue that they talked about, and it got even worse. And now all of a sudden it's like 20 times better. So I'm pretty sure that, Mitch, if you look at a business from business perspective from their end, it makes sense. Because if they came and they were like, hey, we're going to have cell phone, we're going to have texting and calling issues for the next 2 months, they would have lost their entire usership.
Oh, right. For everybody, you would have to. It's your business. You have to bail. If somebody's like, you're going to miss out on most of your calls, see ya.
Yeah, and it sucks, and it pisses me off they did that, but I fully understand why. But all in all, across the board, we've seen a huge increase in talk time and response rates from all of our sellers. So that's probably been a benefit we've seen too. But outside that, man, I think the challenge right now is just the market as a whole. If we're looking at buyers, like, there's definitely a lot of buyers out there, but like a lot of our partners and like our key buyers, they're just kind of being a little bit hesitant because stuff's sitting on the market like a long time.
Yeah, well, a lot of stuff that they bought earlier this year or, during the summer, that's still sitting there. And so everybody's kind of sitting there like, I know I need to buy if I'm going to keep this machine going, but I just don't feel comfortable. And I have 3, 4, 5, some guys, 10 properties sitting on the market. And so they want to take a step back and they want to kind of reassess what they're doing. And it's one of those, that is the cash flow issue, right? It's like, not that these people can't buy another property. It's like, hey, I know what cash flow could look like if I have to wait another 90 days, or if I have to price drop and I take a loss on this one and I take a smaller win than I thought on that one. That's where it becomes a tough situation. So you don't want to overload your plate. And that's just kind of what we're seeing. I feel like people are getting to their limits. There's still people buying though. There's still people wholesaling and flipping, but it's just like, you got to take extra time to find that.
Yeah. What do you think the answer is to that? Because you look back 2021, we would sell things to like the major flippers because, they had large operations, they were buying everything. But then the mom and pops were a great option. People that flip like one house a year or one house in their life, because they would overpay for everything and they were happy to make $10,000 on a flip, whereas a professional group would never do that. Then we went into 2022 and all the mom and pops completely disappeared. And then it was only like the top flippers. And we've kind of been in that zone since, middle of 2022. And now as we get, kind of the end of 2023 here, we now have the professional flippers that are kind of, they're just like slowing down a little bit. The mom and pops have like kind of come back a tiny bit, but not a lot. So who's going to be like the new buyers? Or do you think it's just like you kind of need to nurture the top buyers in every market and just sort of like be available like when they're ready? Or do you think like, is it time to go back to institutional money? Because there's a lot of people that are selling the hedge funds. We never really had the benefit of that because they didn't operate in our market up here. But I'm trying to figure out what like the best strategy is going forward. It
seems like kind of what we're seeing, and I've been hearing this word a lot, which is wholetailing. So basically wholesalers become the flippers if they're not already flippers. Or you become your own buyer and you start flipping. That's one option. But I do think like that wholesale, when we talk about seeing these people that have like pretty much so retail ready properties that are willing to sell at a discount and move flexibly or quickly, one of the two, I do think that that's an option for guys that where it's like, yeah, you can maybe find a buyer for a small fee, or you just, yeah, the buyers in your market just aren't buying something like that product. It's time to just turn that around and wholesale it, because there's still an inventory issue on the market, and prices somehow are up 6% year to date, according to CoreLogic. I don't know how. It doesn't feel that way. I do think some other markets are probably buoying it, and it really talks to like how hyper local real estate can be. But I think that's one option. I mean, what would you do?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think one thing that I've seen a lot of recently, just like for income generation on like the deal finding side, is I'm seeing this huge, I mean, the sub 2 thing, right, is such a huge I don't want to say it's upcoming. It's very prevalent right now. And what worries me about that is you get a ton of people that are negotiating these sub 2 deals with houses that have been on the market for a while, or they have like no equity, things like that, and agreeing to take over the mortgage, and then finding like a newbie investor that wants to buy a quote unquote creative finance deal, which is the flavor of the month, and is willing to put $20,000 down and overpay for this property so that they can secure cheap debt when they're not in a position to actually be securing cheap debt. I mean, I think that's something that a lot of people are doing that I don't necessarily agree with. I also think that's going to lead to a lot of issues in general with both the investor pool and when the banks start calling all of those, which will happen. When it comes to kind of like traditional real estate, honestly, I think one of the best things that someone can do is, outside of like the wholesaling part, is work on trying to figure out how to raise money and planning to hold stuff where you're not quite as subject to the bank loans, and see if you can, buy properties, like even if you're doing it something like you have a fund, or you have like bring in like a private investor and you secure something with like seller financing, as opposed to, even if they owe like 50%, you bring like a private investor to buy out the 50%, and then you have the seller carry additional if needed. I think that you just need to get creative and be able to recognize opportunity right now to be able to maximize stuff. When it's something that's traditional wholesale or like just straight cash offer, I think wholesaling is probably the way to go. Or I also do think that right now you need to be nurturing your buyer relationships, and instead of like having the mentality be that like when I find a deal, one of my buyers will want it, instead being like, I'm going to bring the best possible deal to my buyers so that they choose my deal over the other deals that they have available to them.
Totally.
Right. And it's literally going to be more like they're going to be selective of what they choose. So you want to make it so that they select your deal instead of what the other wholesalers have or their other deal finders have.
Right. And build that trust and that relationship with that person.
Yeah.
I guess I have some additional thoughts and like that are going through my head as you were talking. And I absolutely agree with like the recognizing opportunity. And I would add to that, like, what is your investment plan? And so most people, I lose sight of this sometimes myself, is like, don't have an investment plan. So when you're just like trying to find opportunity, like, hey, can I make something happen with this? Hey, can I make something happen with that? And in reality, it may be, but what is your strategy? So when you talk about if you can go and raise capital to buy things, like you and I have gone back and forth on this, like we should just buy everything. Like, and if we had done that, we'd have lots of properties if we could have raised the capital at that time. And so if your investment strategy is to build a good, strong portfolio that you 100% believe in 5 years from now, go raise the capital, buy things that are going to go in that, knowing that you're probably not going to get a major return on money, you personally, right away, but that you strongly believe in your investment strategy of 5 years from now, you're going to be able to make an exit, because rents do go up, prices do go up. And if you can secure these properties today, even only at a 15% discount. So if you're buying a good Turnkey house at a 15% discount, that's still 15%, right? And so then if over a 5-year period it goes up and now you have 25% equity in this thing, that's a good chunk of money if you can do that on scale. Yeah. And I do, I have a belief that like the residential market itself is pretty strong. So like I know you're talking like sub 2s and like some of these creative deals falling apart. I do think that will happen, but I don't think that there's enough loss to affect largely the actual like single family, small multifamily, like the mom and pop and like the us type people. Because I still know that hedge funds are still buying single family homes. Banks are still, investment banks are still looking to invest in turnkey rentals. But I do think what could happen on a macro scale, like you and I have talked about before, like this office space thing, which we've all been talking about for like a year, but it is like friggin' weird, like crazy weird, because that affects a lot of people's retirement accounts and pension funds, and that can trickle down a little bit. We're talking about multifamily and all these people that bought thinking, well, we're going to get into 1% cap rates soon. It'll just keep compressing. It can't keep compressing. So they bought at a 3 cap thinking that they'll sell in 2 years, 3 years, 4 years at a 2 cap or 1 cap, which is just didn't happen. And they're actually expanding to 4, 5, and 6 caps. That multifamily debt is going to come due as well. So there's going to be distress on the commercial office side of things. There's going to be distress with other people's retirements and other people's like cash savings that they invested with little Johnny, who said he was going to be a real estate syndicator, is going to that. They're going to lose it. And I think overall what that does is it kind of tightens the belt up of people, because they're seeing their retirement counts go down. They're seeing their life savings go away. They're seeing issues with these other assets that are not related to the single family market, which then will affect it by maybe a little bit more of a contraction there. I just don't see it being like a bank loan issue for the single family, because people still are carrying a ton of equity in their property.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, when it comes to the commercial stuff, to what I was actually been thinking about this, and I think it's any sort of alternative asset. I think, in my opinion, I think residential real estate is the safest real estate, because people will always need somewhere to live, right? I think any kind of residential, whether that's multifamilies, like single family homes, mobile home parks, like types of units where people actually like reside there, are going to be the safest, because we have such a major supply issue with that, right? When it comes to this commercial stuff, people are talking about buying these properties under the assumption that it will eventually come back. Okay, that people will eventually need to utilize that property again. But if you look at the way that society's going, that's not necessarily true. And this is like kind of like an extreme example, but you look at a lot of like ancient civilizations, right? They all have like some big ass fucking structure that they built that eventually they like stopped using for some reason. Like seriously. Right. Yeah. And there's no reason that skyscrapers aren't going to be those things for us. Yeah. Right. Or like, that it won't start with the skyscrapers. It'll start with like the strip malls. Right. And then there will be a time where like, yeah, that place was abandoned 20 years ago. And then all the strip malls are abandoned 20 years ago. Right. And no one used them again. I mean, case in point, look at all the shopping malls all across the United States that have been abandoned. And now they're like, what do we do with these? We turn them into like pickleball courts. They're trying to figure out what to do. Like that exact same thing can happen with all these commercial office style buildings. As we move towards remote work, as we move towards people just having less desire to work in general, right? Or like less need for staff members, as people start taking administrative staff overseas, we start bringing in more automation. I mean, people think that these like is a $100 million skyscraper that no one wants to use. Is that worth $100 million?
It's worth nothing at that point.
It's worth
or
nothing,
whatever.
Honestly,
it's worth whatever somebody's willing to pay for it, I guess, and it's probably not $100 million.
Yeah, right. Exactly. It's literally what someone's worth to pay for it, or like unless someone goes and does like a big modification so that it becomes something that is relevant to the times, it's not worth anything. So I think that space in general, people need to be extremely cautious. And
the good thing is though, is like none of our listeners are probably buying $100 million skyscrapers.
Yeah, right. But there are probably listeners that are buying $500,000 commercial properties.
Right.
Right. I think those are the ones that it starts with, because society as a whole does not have a desire to protect that. When people have like an iconic skyscraper in Austin, Texas, that is getting foreclosed on and no one uses it anymore, people are like, oh, but like I remember seeing whatever tower. And like there's like a desire for them to like maintain that because it's nostalgic. But when you're just talking about like the random, commercial office building, like the one that you probably went to that your dental's office was in as a kid, or like your pediatrician, or had like your mom's CPA was in there. Those are going to go away. They're not going to be used for much longer, right? In my opinion. So I don't know. It's interesting just to kind of try to pontificate what that's all going to look like.
Yeah, who knows? But there's definitely, it's going to look, I think we can all agree it's probably going to look different. I just don't see how it can be the same going forward for much longer. In the next 10, 20 years, something's going to look drastically different. I do think in the near term, as that all shakes out, it will still continue to affect the macro economy, just because there's such a large amount of money invested in those commercial type assets and large multifamily from the everyday Americans, well, the everyday upper, middle class Americans that have the ability to invest in those through their pensions and through their retirement accounts and through their savings accounts. And so as those get affected, as those get devalued, of course, they're going to have to tighten the belt somewhere else because they're going to say, I have less money than I thought I did.
Yeah, exactly right. And, when it gets there, who knows what's going to happen for that point? That's how history works. You always kind of try to predict it and then, just be agile enough to deal with whatever comes your way. Yeah.
Unfortunately, they might be calling us and we will help them move their property.
Exactly. And that's why you want to be in our seat, because at the end of it, as a real estate investor, unfortunately, you tend to win when a lot of other people lose, but it is what it is.
Especially if you're buying distressed assets.
Yeah, exactly. So cool. Anything else here before we wrap up?
No, a good conversation.
Yeah, right on. Cool, guys. Well, thanks so much for joining us. If you enjoyed this show, you should please go and share it with anyone else who might find it interesting. And you should also shoot us both a follow on Instagram. We have been adding a ton of stuff on there recently, trying to bring you guys as much value as we can. I am at Mike_invests, and Dan is at InvestManDan. Go ahead and shoot us a follow and send us a DM. And let us know if there's anything you'd like us to address on this show or how we can help you with your real estate game, take it to the next level. And you should definitely go and give Dan a follow because he's had this huge uptick of like 45 to 60-year-old moms because he keeps talking about his kitchen renovations. And, he's over there.
If you're a 45 or 60-year-old mom, I want you. Come on in, bring it with me. But I also want people that are asking investor questions too.
Yeah, right. You only want to provide free entertainment to the right crowds. So, but anyways, give us a follow there, guys. We appreciate it, and we'll talk to you next week.
See y'all.